Taller, faster elevators, the more elevator jobs are centralized around highly built up cities. You don't get to the bus stop at 6 o'clock. You got to be there 10 minutes early because when the bus comes, it's leaving without you. The top 10% guys are usually making over $150,000. The top 5% or 2% guys can make over $200,000.
Welcome to the Blue Collar Blueprint podcast. With Blueprint, we are here to expose, teach, educate you about blue collar career opportunities and things that'll help you getting started in a skilled trade. And once you're in that trade, if you want to learn more, enroll in some of our free courses, head to our website at www.bluecollaredu.com. And with that being said, I am the host, Austin, and today we have a special guest, Mr. Chris Gutkes. Mr. Gutkes, welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate it, Austin. I've been a fan of what you guys are doing out there, and I'm really happy that you were able to have me on this morning.
All right, Chris, let's hop right into it. Let's tell the viewers how you got started in the elevator industry. You know, I did a little bit of digging on the LinkedIn. I seen that you were in the military, U.S. Army for 4.5 years. So first off, thank you for your service. And then I saw that you got into an apprenticeship in 2001. Let's kind of start from your military experience to the point where you're at now so people have a better understanding where you come from.
Well, in order to try to give a big picture here, the way that I explain it is that I did not get into the industry. I was born into the industry. I'm fourth generation elevator constructor, service or technician, second generation on the business side. And my grandfather was the president of the local union around here for a little bit, and then I joined the Army. I was in peacetime Army, thank God. I got out before 9/11, and then I jumped into. I called up Grandpa. I was like, "Listen, I want to get into the trade." So he was able to create a path for me to be able to get into the apprenticeship program, and then I just kind of took it from there. So for 4 years, went to work for a local office of a international elevator company, cut my teeth, learning the trade, went to school one night a week, and eventually got the opportunity to take the mechanics exam, pass that, and move forward. Then around that time, I got hired by my old man at Island Elevator, came over here. It was just the two of us in a windowless office in Wyandanch, New York. We grew the company from there. And then he passed away suddenly in 2016. And at that point, I was basically parachuted into becoming the president of the company. And since then, we've been trying to grow, maintain, and take care of people with elevator needs on Long Island.
So you briefly mentioned about getting into the elevators union. So the company you're right now, are you guys union, and how does that kind of work? Because I know, from a lineman aspect, I always kind of preach, if you want to get into the lineman trade, try to get into a union apprenticeship because they have really good training, the pay, the benefits, and all that stuff is really awesome. So how does that, I think there's an elevator union, right? So like, how does that look like for someone who's wanting to get started in elevators union, like get into an apprenticeship?
There are multiple unions that have elevator divisions. The primary one is the International Union of Elevator Constructors. They run They run the 50 states and into Canada. Then here in New York, there's also a subsection of unionized elevator workers that are attached to the IBEW. It's what they call the EE division here in New York. Then there's also some elevator professionals that are attached to the Teamsters Union. So there are different unions that have their fingers in the trade, but the primary one is the IUEC. We were IUEC affiliated for a while. There was a political changeover, and we found ourselves on the outside of that. So since 2005, we've been a non-union shop.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So for on your side of the country, and I'm not really familiar how it is, over here and stuff too. But I would say if you lived in a bigger city where this high rise buildings, like that's where the elevators are, right? And now elevators aren't like what you guys do. Do you guys specifically just do elevators, or do you guys do like escalators and stuff like that too? Or like what kind is
The elevator trade is closely associated to the Elevator Safety Code Book, which is A17-1. And inside that code book, it covers everything to do with elevators, escalators, material lifts, dumb waiters, anything installed in a residence, construction type elevators, all of that stuff falls into that code book and also falls under the header of the trade. Now, in all fairness, and I'm sure that you can definitely endorse this, not every company has the people that are skilled enough to work on every device that happens to fall under their industry heading. So at Island Elevator, for example, and just kind of touch on where the demographics of the elevators exist. Yes, the taller, faster elevators, the more elevator jobs are centralized around highly built up cities. But since the ADA passed back in 1980, the American with Disabilities Act, every building that's being constructed over 2 stories, right, or over 1 story, and it could be 1 story on top and it could be a second story below, and falls under certain guidelines, that needs to have an elevator or another vertical transportation device in order to allow people with accessibility issues to access every part of the business, specifically when it comes to public access spaces. So I forgot where I was going with all of that. I'm in the elevator trade, and okay, so then I forgot what I was. Oh, that's right. So at Island Elevator, we've got a lot of hydraulic elevators because everything's very low rise. Out on Long Island, it's probably a majority of everything is 10 stories or less. So we're more hydraulic centered. So a lot of our technical ability leans into hydraulic elevators and other low-rise pieces of equipment, but we don't have any escalators. Now, we have the license, we could touch it, but we absolutely have no experience on it. So you don't want to see me touch an escalator because I will probably cause a problem. I will cause a problem. So
okay? Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I had no idea. So if what does an apprenticeship look like if you were to, let's just say, get into an elevators a union apprenticeship? I'm sure they teach all those. They don't just teach you how to work just like on a hydraulic elevator. They're teaching escalators. They teaching the whole entire, like you're saying, under that whole code book. They're teaching all of that, right?
So there's 2 different avenues that you can go for apprenticeship. There is the union avenue, and then there is the non-union. There's a program called CET, which is Certified Elevator Technician. It's a program that has been endorsed by the U.S. Department of Labor and here in New York by the New York State Department of Labor for the related instruction necessary to train up somebody over a 4-year time. Now, the union program, if we went union or non-union as far as the education is concerned, yes, it tries to run the gamut on all the devices that are covered under that code book. But, and I'm sure that you can, again, endorse this, is that when you go through apprenticeship training, it's like basic training. It doesn't tell you everything necessary to be good at everything that happens to be inside these books. It's really about setting a baseline level of familiarity and competence so that you can safely engage with this equipment under multiple years of on-the-job training. So even though there are sections that are dedicated to electric, to hydraulic, to escalators, right, to dumbwaiters, they can't hit everything. There's just so many makes and models that have come out over the last 100 years that when you come out, it's almost like if you've done any martial arts in your history, right? You'll go back, they train you from beginner all the way to black belt, but once you start a black belt, that's when you're really starting your in-depth training as far as being able to take your skill set to a level where you can train other people on that skill set. Does that answer your question?
Exactly. I was just wondering like how the apprenticeship is structured because it's very much the same for the lineman, the union lineman apprenticeship. It's the same way. You need 1,500 hours doing distribution. You need 1,600 hours doing underground work. You need 1,500 hours working on high line transmission lines. You need 200 hours working a substation, right? And it's a 7,000-hour apprenticeship, but that's just the tip. Once you complete your apprenticeship, you become a journeyman. And it's a common thing to say in the trade is like your first 1-2 years after you become a journeyman is you learn more in those 1 or 2 years than you do in your whole entire 3, 4 year apprenticeship, because now you're responsible for having apprentices with you, and now you're the one responsible for, the foreman's like, hey, this is the job scope for the day, and now you're kind of the one like, okay, this is how we're going to do it. So you're forcing yourself, and other people are kind of forcing you to make decisions and figure out how things are done, and there's a lot of learning to be done in that. So yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's very much the same, whether it's union or non-union for the elevator industry. That's how it is, and that's the one of the great things about getting into an apprenticeship. Doesn't matter what trade, right? It can be elevator, it could be lineman, electrician, plumbing, and I will say, maybe it is for you too. I don't necessarily care too much to get on the union topic, but the non-union side and the union side in the lineman industry, the non-union side's pretty ratty. Like we've had guys come over and they're like, yeah, man, they're letting me go work up in the primary in my first like 6 months working in the never touched the tool before. And you're like, what? It took me two
Yeah.
years before I even got to get up in a bucket truck. Right. So like obviously there's more dangers and stuff involved in the trade. And obviously for you guys too, let's touch on a little bit like what are some of the
But
hazards
just to kind of touch on that real quick, it's
Yeah.
it's all about the structure, right? So the U.S. military is exceptional at taking somebody from zero to competent to deal with certain situations because they've got that process, they've got that structure, and they're putting people in positions to graduate them over time. It's the same thing. The union has it more together. Right? The union has it more together because as a large organization, they're actually pouring resources and brain power into making sure that they can bring somebody from zero all the way up. Similar to learning how to drive a car, you're going to be in the car, you're going to be training for a little bit, but once you get your license, the last thing I would recommend is that you jump right on the highway and start doing 75 miles an hour and merging and trying to pay attention to GPS at the same time. That's exactly what it's like to be in the trade. So we want to get you from the point A to getting your license. Then when you get your license, we want to make sure that you're only using back streets, and then you can use service roads, and then you can go onto the highway, right? And graduate it all the way up.
Yeah.
And the reason why the non-union companies, it's based on a company by company basis. So if you are planning on working on the merit shop side of any of the skilled trades, it's important to understand whether or not the organization that you're drawing has an actual training process in order to be able to bring you through it. So yes, I didn't get to be part of an organized union at this point, right? But in the meantime, is this just a bunch of ragtag, sandlot players, or do they actually have a step down version of what it looks like to bring somebody from new to competent mechanic?
Yes, and that's the whole point of an apprenticeship, right? I mean, there's a lot of open shops, plumbing companies like home service companies, right? HVAC, electrician, plumbing, you name it, and they have their own apprenticeship program, and it's a 3, 4, 5 year program, right? And those are awesome. Those are great. But I quickly kind of want to touch about I was talking a little about hazards. What kind of hazards have you run into or seen in your 20 years in the elevator industry? Because there's got to be some pinch points, some crushed fingers, or something like that, I think.
Hazards and safety training are a regular um, obstacle that we have to negotiate with every single day. Every year, people are dying in our trade, just like with the lineman trade. Every year there's somebody that out of a bucket or hits a high voltage line or does something even seemingly innocuous, like backing up a truck and then rolling over one of your own people. You know what I mean? All of these things have a process in order to make sure that they are safely executed and the people that show up to work get to go home to their family at the end of the day. As far as gruesome injuries are concerned, when it comes to the elevator trade, it's just like it is with the rest of the skilled trades. People getting electrocuted, people getting limbs severed off, people dying, falling down the elevator shaft, falling off the side of the elevator, getting crushed between the elevator and the elevator shaft. All of these things are disgusting examples of preventable injuries or deaths. And what I tell people is that when you come in here, you need to make sure that you are watching out for your own best interest. Because if you die on that elevator car top, what happens, right? What happens is they don't have a memorial for you. They don't say a prayer or shut everything down and put up like a nice little remembrance piece for you. They send in another elevator company, they clean up your guts, and then they put that car right back into service. So there's a high likelihood that you or somebody else that you know have ridden inside an elevator that was a participant in a worker fatality or even a passenger fatality or injury. And then in addition to that, secondary, and we try to make the consequences of working unsafe as real as possible, right? But then there's also the step down consequences. Sometimes during these safety trainings, all they're talking about is, dying and severing and all of these horrible, horrible things. What they don't talk about as much, which they should, is the fact that you could go to work and receive an injury that ends your career, right? So maybe you can still go out there and do other things, but you can't work as a lineman. You can't work as an elevator person. I always tell people there's no such thing as a one-armed elevator technician, right? So you're not necessarily dead, or maybe you lose a couple of fingers, or maybe you jump into a place that you shouldn't have jumped into because you skipped something and then you blow out your knee. Guess what? You can't, that's it. Today was your last day at work forever.
That's exactly it. And things happen so fast too. Like I made a video a while back about, a few years ago where a doggone big old Milwaukee gun fell out of the air and hit me on on the head with my hard hat. And like, it's like having a hard hat
Thank
on
God.
and I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but also like it just happened so fast. And it's like, well, the hard hat saved my life because quite frankly, from that weight of object falling that far could have crushed my skull and like I could have been severely injured and brain trauma and stuff, right? So like yeah, things happen so fast and it comes back to just like keeping the head on a swivel, right? You get like I notice all of the newer guys that come into the trade, like the lineman trade, and there's so much going on, right? And you could probably talk about this aspect too as well, is that there's so much going on, they don't know what to do or where to go. So they're running around like headless chicken, right? And it's like, no, you got to just boom down, slow down a little bit. It's like, we're not here. You're not here to run around and try because you're going to get hurt. That's how things are going to work here.
Or you're going to hurt somebody else. Like, I don't want you acting like a jerk and then getting me in a position where now I have to, now I can't go home to my family. That's why when we're always paying attention because we're a two-man trade. I don't know from on the construction modernization side, we're a two-man trade. On the service side and troubleshooting side, we're a single-person trade. So as a two-man trade, the worst people that you could put together, and I'm sure that you can appropriate, you can endorse this also, is a new mechanic and a new helper, right? Because the new mechanic, like you said, he needs that 2 years to be able to understand his awareness and be able to make decisions for two people, or in some cases, multiple people. And then you've got this idiot green helper coming in off of the street, and they, every light is making them dizzy, and it's like, okay, listen, you need to slow down. So what I tell people is that we're paying you to think first, not act first. Your enthusiasm is going to get yourself hurt and it's going to get somebody else hurt. And that's the shit we're trying to avoid. So it's really important for us to be able to bring down that temperature level because I explained to the all of the technicians that work at Island Elevator is that elevators is a mental game. It's a mental game, right? It's probably the same thing with the lineman trade. You know how to turn a wrench. You know how to drive a truck. You know how to do this. These are very low skill set items, but being able to put it all together and make sure that it gets done properly, professionally, and without any injuries, that's where the art happens.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it any better. So now I want to touch on, so on LinkedIn, you made the post about, 5 rules, tips, and tricks for apprentices or green guys. Let's go over that list really quickly. And so, people that are viewing this, and I'm obviously going to share this too as well, so people can know. I want to hear your 5 rules.
Well, the 5 rules were inspired by you, Austin. Apparently, you found that thing that was scratched out. Those 13 rules for grunts and apes. What did you call them? I try to.
13 rules for or 16 rules for grunts and apes. So the groundmen and apprentices in our trade, we call them grunts and we call them apes. So it was a picture I found that a lineman had wrote inside just a bin on a truck with either a Sharpie or something, and he put 16 rules and he listed them all right there. So apprentice could open up the bin of the truck and be like, oh yeah, these are the 16 rules that I need to follow. and they're pretty common general rules, right? There's nothing like, you know how to do the Ohm's law theory every single day. Like these are just like things that apprentices and groundmen should be doing. So yeah, let's hear your five.
They're like the unwritten rules of the trade, but then somebody took the time to write them down. And when you were reading them, I was like, that makes perfect sense. But you kind of learn that in graduations over the first couple of years that you're in the trade, as opposed to somebody just saying, here, do this from day one, and you're already going to be more successful than 80% of your peers. So you're putting me a little bit on the spot because I I did the 5 rules, but I don't remember all 5 rules off the top of my head. So
Hey,
mostly it's about make sure that you, number one is, and I hate this shit, you have to show up on time. And I think that was one of your rules too. Show up early. If you're early, you're on time. And that trends over from my military experience. But I see a lot of people being very flippant about what time that they show up to work. And you need to remember one very important thing is that you, right, are not the center of the universe, right? You're there working in a team trying to deliver a necessary service for a customer that is paying for it. You show your ass up on time. Okay, because you are wasting everybody else's time by just deciding to do, if that's what you want to do, like if you want to do that, Bill, then go work for Bill Elevator, right? But an Island Elevator, you're going to show up on time. So that was number one. Number two, I think, was go to.
really quickly, like what's on time? Because I was always taught 15 minutes early. If you're not 15 minutes early, you're 15 minutes late. So like, and people always like combat me, be like, well, why am I going to show up 15 minutes early when I don't start till 6? Why am I going to show up at 5:45? It's like, it's not about showing up at 5:45 and like going to work. It's about showing up at 5:45 and then being able to go get the stuff ready for the day. Like it's people over exaggerate. I don't start getting paid till 6. Okay, well, your duty as a groundman or apprentice is you show up a few minutes early and start getting coolers filled with ice and water, start getting the trucks warmed up. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like that's how I was always taught. So that's what I envision for other green people to do. And yeah, I don't know.
For sure. The way that I learned it in the military was if you are trying to catch a 6 o'clock bus, what time do you get to the bus stop? You don't get to the bus stop at 6 o'clock. You got to be there 10 minutes early because when the bus comes, it's leaving without you. And that's how I tell people if you can't meet me at the park and ride to get to the job, right? I would tell my helpers, then drive yourself, right? Because the bus leaves at 6 o'clock. And when we're showing up, yeah, you don't get paid until 6 o'clock, but when are you considered to be at work, right? It's not in your car at 6 o'clock. I'm not paying you from 6 o'clock to open up the car, stretch out, check your LinkedIn, chit chat with your girlfriend. No bullshit. This is time that we've committed to each other, right? You have expectations out of me. I have expectations out of you. My expectations are that you are starting work at whatever the beginning of your shift is. And that means that you have to get your ass out of the car. If this was, I almost used a 4-letter word. If this was McDonald's, right? They don't start paying you for your shift when you're in your car out in the parking lot. You got to get your ass out of there, get inside, punch in, boom. Now you're ready to go. So that's the exact same principle for showing up for elevator work, skilled trade work, whatever it is. You get your ass out of there. And if this was the case where Austin, especially Austin, is telling me as my supervisor to be there 10 minutes early, there's no negotiations. Just do what the hell you're supposed to be doing, right? So Austin tells me to get there 2 minutes early. I get there 10 minutes early. And then as soon as the 6 o'clock bell whistles, that's it. I'm ready to start putting my hands on things. And you know what it does, especially for green people, and this is, and I'm sure that you can endorse this also, it builds trust because they believe that you are committed to the process. You are committed to becoming a lineman, helping the team be successful, growing the company, all of these things. It's the baseline thing that you can do. I remember I used to show up when I was an apprentice, and I used to ask my mechanic, hey, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? He's like, you show up to work every single day early. You're already 90% better than everybody else. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty fucking low bar that's a pretty low bar to set as far as being, accomplished in the trade. So, but the truth is that if you can just do what the heck you're told, like, no, Austin's not asking you to work unsafe, right? He's just asking you to be there 10 minutes early, ready to go, right? And then you're a guy that Austin can trust. He can tap you for a duty or a responsibility, and he knows that it's going to get done because you're already focused. You're drilled in.
Yeah, and you mentioned something there about the bar. You're like, the bar is that low, and yeah, apparently the bar is that low now. Like, you get congratulated for showing up to work on time. Like, no, that's not how it's supposed to be. Like, but if that's how low the bar is, depending on whatever skill trade you get into, it doesn't take much for you to
Yes.
be part of the 1% of the best apprentices out there. If that's what it
Yes.
takes, right? So that's a great point. Let's move on to rule 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Rule 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I can't remember what rule 2 was, but then one of them was go to school, get good, and then get better, right? So you got to go to school, especially if you're an apprentice, but even more so when you're a mechanic, because the real learning starts after you become blessed with the label of a mechanic. But as far as school is concerned, again, I'm sure that you had a similar experience. You show up, there's 20 people in your class. 18 people show up, 15 people show up, 13 people show up, 3 of them are sleeping. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're wasting your own freaking time here. Show up, get committed, and get the heck out of there, because who the heck wants to be a freaking helper forever? I mean, when I first came into business, there were still career helpers, people that had been helpers for like 25 years. They just didn't want the responsibility. I was like, no way. I am out of this game as quickly as possible. Go to school. Then when you become a mechanic, guess what? The entire industry is continuing to evolve around you, right? So if you don't continue to evolve, and I'm not saying that you got to be drilled in like night school, like you're going to become a goddamn attorney. I'm saying that you have to stay focused and pay attention and continue to consume information that's going to make you a better line person or an elevator person, right? So go to school, get good, get better. Another one was work safe and then work safer, right? So we talked about that. Safety is paramount. We cannot jerk around with that on any level. It's safety and showing up late are the two things that I am completely humorless about, right? So I get very intense, and I intentionally make the conversations as uncomfortable as possible so that the person I'm talking to never wants to have that conversation again. Because if we even joke about safety, like, don't even joke about it because it's not funny, right? Joke about something else. So there's that. And then there was a couple more, but I can't remember them. I got them like a few weeks ago.
You provided enough in those in that little segment, that more than enough. That was great. I love how intense you get with it, because we need that passion, right? And there's a lot of guys out there that they don't have that passion. There's a reason why these green guys, these apprentices, these grunts are the way they are, is because, you know, that lack of discipline and stuff. Like, guys, like, as the journeyman, as the mechanic, you're supposed to be the one on top of the apprentice, because the apprentice, the helper, the groundman, they're really only as good as their journeyman or as their mechanic they're working with, right? So for me, I try to be, you know, if the apprentice screws up, like the other day, you know, this is a good example where I'm not huge into confrontation, but I will say something if I need to. But like our apprentice, you know, like his sole duty is to like clean the trucks out at the end of the day. And like he went like 2-3 days without cleaning out our bucket truck, like the inside garbage and blah blah blah. I showed up to work on Thursday morning, and I opened up the door, and the garbage still full, the cab is still a mess, and I said, heck with this. I took that trash, I went and just scattered it in the cab of his truck. And then he see me walking back, and he's like, what was that for? I said, dude, your sole job as an apprentice is literally to keep my truck clean, and you fail it, you suck. And he's like, oh, you know, you don't have to do all that. I said, will you learn your lesson? He said, yeah. So from there on out, my truck has been spotless every single morning into it, right? So it takes a little bit of that intensity to, you know, teach a lesson or two, because some guys are slower than others, and they don't take, it takes a little bit more time to pick things up, or it takes this or that. So, you know, and that
It's the generation, right? So it's the snowflake generation. They think everybody should be celebrating everything that they do all the time, you know, blue ribbons and all of this other shit. The bottom line is that when I was a mechanic, I told my apprentice, I said, your job is to make sure that you get me the right tool before I ask for it in the shortest amount of time. So you need to pay attention to what I'm doing, anticipate what I need to do next, and then hand me that tool before I ask for it. So a few times I had the apprentice turns around and he doesn't have the tool ready. And then I ask him to get the tool, and it takes him like 3 or 4 minutes to get the tool. I said, you're doing nothing except making sure that these tools are exactly where you need them to be. So I would take the bag, turn it upside down, dump out all the tools all over the place, and have him pack the bag again so that you can find the tools. I only needed to do that 3 times before I started getting my tools on time. So people can't be afraid of confrontation when it comes to this new generation. Their parents, which is my generation, Generation X, we screwed these kids up. It's all our
Love to
fault,
hear that.
right?
Thank you.
So it's up to us to be able to unscrew this situation. But the way what's the name? I was watching The Last Dance with the Chicago Bulls. It was awesome. And the coach of the Chicago Bulls at the time, I forget what his name is, and it's escaping me right now. But he said something that perfectly explained what my philosophy was as I grew up, as my parents downloaded all of their issues into me, right? So it's that you are only a success in the moment that you are performing a successful act. You have to do it again, right? So you don't get to live off of one good act for the rest of your career. Another thing that we say in the elevator business, and I'm sure they probably say it to you, is that it takes 100 attaboys to make up for one aw shit. So make sure that you are constantly building up good karma, good trust within your team, and those things will reciprocate themselves appropriately.
So that's a great point, because just another thing I've always heard is that you could show up to work on time for 20 years, but the one time you show up late is the time that they remember. So,
Oh yeah, and you better bring coffee. Bring coffee, bring humility, just tone it down a little bit. Stop with the excuses. Nobody's listening to it. We all drove on the same roads. We all showed up on time. You didn't, right? So come in, tail tucked between your legs, bring donuts and coffee. I'm sorry, here you go for the guys. And then again, you're building teamwork, you're exercising leadership, you're holding yourself accountable. All of these things really matter in the long term as far as the mindset. Again, it's not the skill set, it's the mindset necessary to be successful in any of the skill traits, any of them.
So quickly, you'll get a kick out of this one. This one's really good. So we had an apprentice. We do Wednesday morning safety meetings, and he just or it was a Thursday morning, whatever the day it was, but he just wasn't there in the morning. And the GF, the general foreman, so the GF supervisor, so the boss of all the guys in the yard, was like, "Hey, where's your apprentice at? I got a couple things for him." I don't know, we haven't seen him yet this morning. Is he here? I don't know, I haven't seen him. She said, "What's his phone number? I'm gonna call him up." So the GF calls him up, wakes him up. He was still sleeping. The boss had to call and wake him up. And then he's like, crap, you know what I mean? Obviously, the boss is calling the apprentice to wake him up, to get him out of bed. And that's literally one of my biggest fears, even to this day. I'm a lineman, I'm a journeyman now. But dude, that's one of the biggest fears for me, is that I have to get a phone call from the boss saying, "Hey, where are you at? You're not at work." And you're like, "Crap, I'm still sleeping. I'm still in bed." The worst thing ever.
That's the worst. No, but again, when it comes to life, when it comes to the skilled trades, everybody makes mistakes, but only idiots make the same mistake twice, right? Only untrustworthy people refuse to take accountability for the mistakes that they make. Right. So if the GF calls up Austin and wakes his ass out of bed and he shows up to work 3 hours later, right, you better show up with some with some penance, right, and kind of so that you can show the world that you understand that you made a mistake and that you're going to try your hardest not to make that same mistake twice. The worst thing you can do is to show up and act like there's nothing wrong, because there's something wrong, right? And it's either the act that you performed or it's the person that performed it. You don't want to be the thing that's wrong, right? Just the act.
Yes, exactly. So let's quickly touch on, because we haven't talked about it yet, but this is a very important thing to talk about. Hence the reason, kids want to get into the lineman trade or the XYZ trade, is the money. Let's talk about money just a little bit, what kind of money you could expect to make. It doesn't matter if it's open shop or union or anything like that. You've been in the industry for a long time, so I'm sure you know what kind of numbers someone could accrue through a career in the elevator industry.
Well, it does depend on whether or not you're in a union shop or an open shop. It also depends on what region you're located in. Elevator technicians are paid a higher rate in the New York metropolitan area than some of the other areas of the country. But to give a general understanding of what it looks like to make money inside the elevator industry, we would start with the apprentice. So first year apprentice, if you're in the IUEC, comes in at $30 an hour. After 6 months, you'll get some vesting, and then after about a year and a half, you usually get your union card. So that's not necessarily the same thing that you're going to get in a merit shop. In a merit shop, you might be starting somewhere around like $20 to $25 an hour. Then as in a merit shop, now the merit shop and the union shop are a little bit different in this way, where we go next, right? So we started at the baseline. When you're talking about a merit shop, your skill set, right, and the demand for that skill set will carry you forward as and graduations in your pay scale, right? So that pay scale can go, right? It could just keep going the better you are, right? I heard you talk about some pay scales where we're talking about the top 10%, right? Top 10% of performers in a particular trade. And the union side, you, depending on whether or not you finish your time and you do your school and you pass all your classes, then you will continue to graduate based on a preset pay scale. So it's not necessarily tied into your skill set or your ability to perform out into the. So that's why we call them merit shops and union shops. And the union shops definitely have very rich fringes. So when we're talking about health benefits and an annuity, and then they got then there's always 401k options on top of that stuff. So there, but you'll continue to graduate up when we're talking about on the union shop, specifically in New York, because I don't really know what's going on in Idaho or Texas. But the as you get up, so if you go through a union shop, you get to mechanic, you can easily make in the New York area $100,000, especially if you're working in the 5 boroughs. But some of the top guys, like the top 10% guys, are usually making over $150,000. The top 5% or 2% guys can make over $200,000, especially if you roll in a little bit of overtime. But most of these guys that are like the top of their game, they're all getting paid over scale anyway. It's just a matter of how much over scale. On the merit shop side, again, you can go up and continue to graduate all the way through to basically wherever the market will support or your company will support you on a wage scale. But let's say, for example, Austin comes to Island Elevator and he starts at the bottom and he works his way up and he's like, I feel like I want to make more money. I want to go over here. The value that Island Elevator is bringing to my life isn't as good, and Okay, you take that skill set. High level skill set is transferable. That's what I try to tell people when it comes to skilled trades. It doesn't matter if you get trained as an elevator technician in New York or Idaho or Texas or Arizona, right? You can travel. You can move out of that state because there's always people looking for talent. Always, right? Especially in this hiring market. So you could go from Arizona into Chicago, get a job, get a raise. Now you got higher cost of living, but that's your goddamn problem, right? So but you can go. Your skill set will go with you. So I don't know if I answered that question. Did I answer that question?
No, yeah, basically, like I'm just more so curious. Like you mentioned in a union shop, you starting off as a first step as at $30 an hour, and then as you move through the apprenticeship, like you become, let's say you complete the apprenticeship, you complete all the classes and XYZ. Like obviously, like you're saying, for us, it's every 6 months or every 1,000 hours you get a pay increase through your apprenticeship. So first and second step is an increase, and it starts out at like 65% of journeyman rate. And then once you're a 7th step, you're at 95% journeyman rate. And then you top out, become a journeyman. Now you're 100% journeyman rate. And then the only way for you to really make more money hourly is if you go work in a different local. So if I go work in California, their hourly rate over there is like $70 an hour. Or if I go to New York, they're like 64, depending on where you go. Or you can move up to be a foreman. And those they make a little bit more, a couple more dollars an hour, and then a general foreman. But that stuff takes like time and experience. Like I'm not going to be a foreman or GF for many years because I don't choose to. I don't even want to. I want more. I have way too much to learn to try to even hop into one of those higher positions. So that was really it. The basis of the question, or just what I was curious about, was what that kind of pay scale looks like. And so yeah, you start out $30 an hour, and then you become. So would mechanic be like journeyman level? Then if you're an elevator mechanic, is that like completing the apprenticeship and becoming a journeyman? So, or is that exactly?
So, being in New York again, once you complete your 4 years, you have to take what's called the mechanics exam. In local one, they have the NEAT program. Again, this is a very structured and organized training program to be able to bring people from zero all the way to journeyman. That is a 4-year program, and NEAP stands for National Elevator Industry Education Program. And they require at the end of the 4 years that you have to take a standardized exam that encompasses all of the information that you learned in the 4-year apprenticeship training. If you pass that, then you can become a mechanic. If you don't pass that, then it is up to the discretion of the company of whether or not you become a mechanic. Also in New York, there's
I was just
pardon?
saying, I see that. That's how it is for us too. You got to take a journeyman test at your end of your apprenticeship, and once you pass that journeyman test that the union sets out for you, then you get your yellow ticket that says journeyman lineman on it. So yeah, it's a very similar thing.
That's very exciting. But not all of the trades have that. So, like, especially in New York, the plumber's trade, steam fitters, I would say probably even some of the electricians. I don't even think that the local electricians have a journeyman test over here. But if you're in a merit shop, it's the same thing with the CET program. You have a test at the end of that encompasses all 4 years. And once you get that, boom, that CET certification, just like your journeyman yellow card, that's transferable. That goes with you. You could take that to California and tell people, I am a CET. I've got X amount of hours. Here's all of my certifications and licenses. I want a job tomorrow, and they'll give it to you.
See, that's one of the coolest things about the skilled trades is that skill, that talent that you accrue, build through apprenticeship or through just 5-10 years of working in a shop. It's transferable to anywhere in the country, right? So maybe you don't have a piece of paper that says, "Oh yeah, I have 10,000 hours in this trade or whatever." But if you're able to perform and do the job, efficiently and safely, and they can see that, then like that skill goes anywhere. And
That's 100% true. And that skill is something that you have to take ownership of. You have to take the initiative in order to build up your skill set, knowing exactly how valuable it is. Because let me tell you something. If you're an elevator person in New York and I go to Austin in Arizona and I want to go work for Austin's elevator company, he's going to be able to screw my resume, right? He's going to be able to tell in 10 minutes whether or not I'm completely full of shit or if I'm the real deal. He knows. He'll take a look at my tools. He'll take a look at my paperwork. He'll listen to how I speak, and then he knows right away. So you do have transferable skills, but they're only skills if you create them as being transferable skills. If you're just some ding dong who shows up late and then has basically been sleeping through all of his registered hours and getting his pay raises as he goes along, and guess what? You're not going anywhere, guy. You're going to Chipotle, right? But as far as making sure that you remain, it is a fight. It is a fight to go from zero to being considered a respected member of your trade, and then maintaining that respect and continuing to learn. Right? You can't take anything for granted.
no. All right, Chris. So kind of close this podcast out. Let's say what steps or actions could a younger individual take to get started in the elevator industry? And now, like you said, it's different. Like in New York, you don't know how it would be in Idaho, Arizona, or Washington, or Minnesota. But from your experience, what would be the best way? Let's start with open shop, non-union, or union shop too, and let's just kind of.
I can hit them for you both at the same time. If I was going to start my trade all over again, if I was going to come in year one, or if I was going to talk to my nephew who just turned 18 and said, how do I do this? The first thing I would do is I would tell you, listen, go down to the union halls and sign up and register, right? So the first thing that you got to now in New York, there's a couple of different unions that have elevator divisions. So go to every single one of them. If you can't go, sometimes they have like open enrollment. So you get like in local 3, you actually have to they sleep on the street in order to be able to get an application because they only hand out 500 applications every 3 years. So it's a very serious thing to try to get into the EE division. Other than that, there's other different ways that you can kind of get in there, knock on the door, find out when their open enrollment is, and then make sure that you participate in it. Then they give you a qualifier test to make sure that you're not a complete freaking idiot, right? And then they'll put you on a list, and then you got to stay on top of that list, right? It's just like if you wanted to be a cop or a fire person or whatever it is. While you are on that list, it does not relieve you of the obligation to start to build your skill set. So there's certain things that you can do on your own in order to make yourself a more attractive person to be considered for that position, right? So number one, you do not need any certifications for this. You can go online and take your OSHA 10, OSHA 30, OSHA 40, right? A guy who shows up with that type of those cards already in his possession tells me that he is serious about, or she is serious about what it is that they want to be able to accomplish in this trade. Because you have to understand, the company is making an investment in you, you stupid idiot. Show up on time and work hard, because for 4 years, what I tell new apprentices is that you are not, you're an expense, right? You're something that I spend money on in order to help somebody else that I actually trust to do the job. So make yourself as valuable as possible. Use your time as well as possible. So you're on the list. You're waiting to get into the union hall. In the meantime, you're going ahead and getting some basic OSHA certifications. Now go out and do something with your hands, right? Don't jerk around and drive Uber and DoorDash. That's fine on the side, but you got to find like a real trade where you can, where they will allow you to put your hands on power tools, take measurements, cut things, put stuff together. Familiarize yourself with tools. All of these are skill sets that just go ahead and they pave the way to say, all right, all I need, what you're doing is you're preparing yourself for an opportunity. See, when they call you, whether it's the union hall or whether it's another a merit shop or somebody that went ahead and decided to accept your application, they are not giving you shit. You only get an opportunity. They open the door for you. What you do after that is all up to you. So you're building up your skill sets, you're on the list. Now, what are other ways that you can try to get in there? Well, for the most part, when it comes to elevators, you kind of got to know somebody. So if you happen to know somebody, call that somebody and tell them that you're interested. And if you show up with your OSHA 40 and your 2 years working with a carpenter firm and all of this, don't if you're going to go for the elevators, then don't waste your time painting walls, right?
Yes.
Put your hands on power tools.
Yes.
Not that there's anything wrong with painters. It's just, it doesn't translate. That skill set doesn't translate. So the other way into the trades, skilled trades, and specifically the elevator trade, is if you're coming out of the military, they have a program that's called hard hats to helmets.
Yes.
Right? No, helmets to hard hats.
Yep.
Excuse me.
Yep.
So if you're coming out of the military at any given point in the future, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you reach out. They got an easy website that you can follow, and that will give you a inside track, because some of these companies are allowed to hire away from the union bench and hiring list if they hire from other specific categories. So a union shop can hire one guy off the street, not through the union, and bring them into the company and into the trade. Again, provide them an opportunity. So they're allowed to do that if they hire, like, say, 5 people off the bench, then you can bring one of your own people in. It's the same thing when it comes to the hard hats, the helmets to hard hats program, is that it gives them an allowance to go ahead and go to that vertical and be able to grab somebody who they believe would be a talent and a good addition to their team. Other than that, I would also, again, if this was me and I was advising my nephew, I would say go to where the people are that you want to work for, right? Networking, some sort of trade groups coming together. Maybe there's like a sponsorship or a 5K run or something like that. Or I know guys that got into the elevator business because they were a bartender, and the elevator owner used to stop at the bar and order the same drink every day until he asked him for a job, and then boom, he got a job. So if the best way to get in is to know somebody, you got to start to know people, right? And the best way to know people is to stick out your hand. Don't act like a jerk. Stay committed. Show your credentials and your intention to work hard and bring value, and somebody's going to give you a shot.
Yeah, so just to hit on that really quick, I was going to ask you about that. So if you're a young guy like your nephew or 18-year-old or whatever, what what is the better, like you're saying, the best way to get into the elevator world is to know somebody, right? And well, if I don't have I didn't grow up, I don't know anyone in the alignment industry, like I just had to go out and do it myself. For the elevator industry, what's the best way to know somebody? Are you just looking up Island Elevator and like showing up to the office every day with some flowers and donuts for the lady in the front, or like calling calling? Right. So is that the way to get the, like your foot in the door is to, I always say it, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Why? Like I'll bug somebody until they're like, okay, let me, whatever, help you or whatever the case may be. Is that a way to do it, for a merit shop?
Sure. Yeah, you could definitely do that. What I always say is that when, we're kind of talking a little bit about sales here because you're selling yourself. You always want to make sure that you're bringing value. You're always bringing value to the person that you're trying to sell something to or provide a solution to or message to, right? So yes, there is value in bringing donuts, but there might be more value if you were to be able to bring in, say, hey, listen, I've got my CDL. I could be a great truck driver here for you guys. If you go ahead and just give me an opportunity, I'll sweep up the shop. I'll do whatever it is. The only thing I ask is that next time you hire an apprentice, you put me out, right? That's my only condition. Other than that, I will kill myself for you, right? It depends on how bad you want to get into the trade. So
Yeah.
bring value. You have some sort of value that you can bring to somebody. I don't know what it is, and if you don't have any skill set that is transferable to a business owner or to an organization that's trying to accomplish something, then go get it. Right? Don't sit around and wait for the world to hand you something. You have to go out, be hungry, grab it by the neck, and then choke it to death. Right? That's the only way you get shit.
Hey, you got me hyped up, man. I want to go to do some cold calls and go just do it myself just because you got me excited about this stuff.
I'm telling you, you can do it.
But like people don't realize that's what it takes. You know what I mean? A lot of people think that there the opportunity will just arise. That's like 0.01% of people. Like you have to be a killer. You have to be able to go out there and want it and show that you want it, because if you don't, there's thousands of other people that are right behind you doing the same exact thing. So as you were saying, it sounds like the elevator industry, it's a pretty competitive industry. Like you're saying, people are sleeping on the streets waiting for the door to be open so they can get one of the 500 applications. Like that's competitive. And you're competing with guys in neck and neck who want it. And if you don't want it, you're out, pal. And that's how it is for lineman trade too. This trade has gotten so competitive that like if you want to get into this trade, you have to do everything in your power to get into this trade. You got to go get your CDL. You got to go get your certifications. And now, of course, you'll get your certifications throughout the apprenticeship, like your OSHA and stuff. There's a few that you should and you need to get, but like you have to want it. There's this guy that I've been he matched with me on LinkedIn and he wants to become a lineman. He's been doing sales for the last 10 years of his life. He's like, I'm sick of doing sales, working in an office. I like doing stuff with my hands. And I'm like, all right, dude, yeah, like let me help you. And so I told him exactly. I said, this is a blueprint. This is exactly what you need to do. Go get your CDL, XYZ. I'm not going to get into the whole spiel right now because if somebody wants to learn to be a lineman, they go to my website and they can learn exactly what they need to do. But anyway, and he's a killer. He wants it. He knows. He's a sales guy. He knows how to sell himself. And he's like, okay, I'm going to do it. So he goes out. He gets the CDL. Right now, he's driving truck. He has his application in. He says, I'm going to kill the interview because he's already took the test. He's going to do an interview. He's like, I'm going to kill the interview. I'm going to sell myself. He's like, I want this. There's nothing else in the world I want more than to get into the lineman industry. I'm like, I have no doubts in my head, in my mind, that you're going to get into apprenticeship, become a lineman, and you're going to be a fantastic lineman because you sound passionate about it and you want to do it. And that's what it takes. You know what I mean? You have to have that mentality. And that's the kind of apprentice I want working with me. Someone who wants to be at work and like doing this stuff. That's the guy I want there, not just a guy that's I make great money. That's why I'm here. I don't like those guys, right? If you're doing it, yeah.
There's a couple of common sayings that I live by. Number one is if you want to be part of the 1%, you have to do what the 99% won't do. Right? So you have to get out of your way and go get it. Another thing is that success is not owned; it's rented, and the rent is due every day. So you need to be able to wake up and want to get at it. Otherwise, somebody else is just going to go ahead and pass you by. Those are like some of the things. And then the other thing is that, the shit that we do, right? Waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, making sure that you're working on time, making sure that you're executing and training and looking out for your team, right? Because you have to look out for his back. He's got to look out for you. That requires something that a lot of people don't have. It's called discipline, right? Discipline. And Mike Tyson says that discipline is doing something that you hate, but doing it like you love it. So you got to make sure that you find a way to convince yourself to shift that mindset and fall in love with being up at 4:15 in the morning and then just cleaning the front of that truck. Like that's got to be something you look forward to. I can't wait to clean that truck. I hope Austin made a complete mess. Fuck this guy, I can clean anything he leaves behind.
Yes, exactly. That's the passion that's the passion that you need to have, because that's ultimately it's going to make you a successful apprentice or someone in a skilled trade, is to have that passion. I love to have those guys working with me on a crew somewhere, because man, it makes me even want, like, the crew dynamic, the crew culture, like that stuff is like, the job could be the worst thing in the world. It could be cleaning out shit out of a doggone drain on the side of the road.
Yeah.
I'm working with cool guys, and
Yeah.
that's the whole thing, right? And that's very important. So, Chris, I'm gonna end that on that note. You dropped some bombs in this podcast. I really appreciate you coming on and teaching more about the elevator industry. I knew nothing about it, and now I know a whole lot more. And so, anyone who's watching this podcast, listening to this podcast, hopefully if you're interested in becoming an elevator tech mechanic, you'll know exactly the steps you need to take to get started in the industry. And it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity, but it's a lot of competitive opportunity. So if you want it, you're going to have to step out of your way and get ahead of the curve and really put in the work and build some discipline to get into this trade, because it's not easy. All right, Chris. Well, thank you for coming to the podcast, and you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, brother.